What's going on, Internet? IG back again today, and I've got a phrase for you: confirmational bias. I'm throwing that phrase out there because I got to be upfront in saying that in most Linux distributions, I try to go in with a pretty open mind. I try to go in without too much history to color what my opinions of a particular distribution are. However, I've just got to say that Fedora, since Fedora 29, has been one of those releases that I just can't get enough of. I've switched away from Fedora for a brief time, and I've come back to it again with Fedora 30. And I've just got to state up front that a lot of my thoughts about this is definitely going to feel like confirmational bias. If you thought I was positive with Fedora 29, you probably know that I'm going to be more so with Fedora 30. Now, that's not to say I don't have my gripes and little things that I would love to see worked on, but by and large, I find the work that Fedora is doing very valuable and very impressive. Okay, so where to start? So first of all, the obvious thing that everyone points to as soon as they start talking about Fedora 30 is GNOME 3.32. We're actually up to 3.32.2 by now. And obviously the main story with that is just the speed, the performance improvements, but also the appearance improvements. So we've got a brand new icon set that has been vastly simplified compared to the overcomplicated 3D rendered icons that we used to have. They're a lot more scalable, they're a lot more colorful. I enjoy them. I don't find the need to go and find another icon set immediately. They catch the eye, they're very much what is in trend, and they stand out in a nice kind of way. I can't say that for the rest of the theme, but the theme to me is perfectly functional. I haven't felt the need to go and change it, as to me, the default theme works in well enough with the overall design philosophy of the desktop that I don't see the need to go muck it up with my own. So that's to say that I really didn't touch this distribution appearance-wise, apart from do the classic dock over here on the right-hand side, top icons extension, and that's about it. Oh, and enabled the Do Not Disturb feature that I love, that Pop! OS does out of the box. So honestly, there's not a whole lot of tweaking that I have to do with this distribution out of the box to get it to what I personally like. Now, of course, your mileage is going to vary, but the important story here is that the system uses less RAM on a cold boot and less CPU cycles on a cold boot, and as you're using the system, than it ever has before. And I appreciate that. And the difference that I feel with this distribution is very, very visceral. Visceral? I'm not sure if visceral is the right word here, but I'm going to roll with it anyway. And so here are the key things that really stand out to me about Fedora. First of all, their hardware support is very good. Now, this is a different kind of hardware support than what I talked about in Pop! OS. In Pop! OS, you get a very well-tailored distribution to especially getting the most out of your hardware when it comes to gaming and graphics card support. Now, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole with Fedora. The reason being is because driver support on Fedora is getting better and better all the time, but it's probably not the easiest distribution out of the box to go and grab the exact driver that you need. Like I said in Fedora 29 review, it is actually easier nowadays than it ever has been. You open up the software store, you simply jump into the software repositories, enable the NVIDIA repository, and it will actually prompt you whether or not you want to enable third-party repositories from the get-go. That'll give you the NVIDIA drivers, you can go get them. So it's pretty simple, but that's not the type of hardware support I'm talking about. Because of the fact that the Fedora team work very closely and obviously serve as a test bed for Red Hat Enterprise Linux, a lot of the great features that come from the recent releases of the Linux kernel are pushed to the forefront or are given space to shine and are not altered in the release of Fedora. Now, back in the early days of GNOME 3, this was probably more of a curse than it was a blessing. Nowadays, you don't have to install things like PowerTop or TLP to try and get better battery out of your laptop. I easily get equivalent battery life between Windows 10 and Fedora on the exact same hardware now. And that I could say that for Fedora 29, I can say that for Fedora 30. The power management by default that Fedora and the Linux kernel 5.0. whatever the heck we're on now is really, really great. And also when it comes to the other sort of whiz-bang features that that this particular device has, in terms of the Wacom support, out of the box, no worries. Thunderbolt support, no problem at all. Webcam support is fine. The speakers are, it is what it is. And the support that Wayland gives me as a touch device is actually vastly better than what I get from Ubuntu out of the box. So I want to use scrolling in Firefox as an example. Now, right now I'm scrolling with my mouse wheel. You can hear that going on. Okay, now I can also use the scrolling on the touchscreen to actually scroll up and down and get smooth scrolling on the screen itself. Now, the difference here is that in Wayland, the support for touch seems to be further ahead than what it is in Xserver. In Xorg, you have to do a bit of digging and tweaking to get your touch input to act like a natural scroll, compared to Wayland, which just seems to do it out of the box. I don't really know. So I do use Wayland as the default window manager, or rather the default display manager. There's too many names for these things. And all up, this leaves me with a distribution that after the initial 20 minutes of tweaking, I can kind of set it and forget it. The other thing that I want to point to is updates. Now, Fedora is definitely a release-based distribution. There are releases that roll around every year or so, and that's great. But what I also have found is that when it comes to Linux kernels, when it comes to security patches, when it comes to more up-to-date versions of software, Fedora seems to be very accommodating with pushing those packages downstream. In fact, I was not really lacking too many features apart from the overall GNOME stack of the upgrade to 3.32. I wasn't really missing a whole lot in Fedora 29 before I made the jump. So I wouldn't, there's absolutely no way you could ever get away with calling Fedora a rolling release at all. But the way that they push updates seems to be so much better, and the software seems to stay so much more relevant than it does on Ubuntu. Now, that's also, you could also boil that down to the Flatpak support and that kind of thing, which is again, it's not enabled out of the box, but it's stupid easy to enable it. Literally a trip to FlatHub, you download a tiny little file, you double click the file, and congratulations, you've got Flatpak enabled on your system. It's literally that simple. And so, all of this boils down to not just the work that the GNOME team do, that obviously affects directly what the Fedora release looks and feels like, but it is also a lot to do with the Fedora team and how well they've integrated their package manager, all of their under the hood stuff with the surface level. And because of the fact they're not doing much to the surface level, they leave it very vanilla, you get a distribution that feels, just believe me when I say this, it feels very coherent. From the top to the bottom, this distribution feels like it belongs. There's no weirdness, there's no quirks that leave you scratching your head wondering why it's there. A great example of this that is very surface level, but you see it every single day, is when you boot up the system and you're presented with your boot menu. As soon as I boot into Fedora, I don't see any text, I don't see any command line stuff. I see a beautiful default Lenovo Uefi logo that I always see when I boot my laptop up. But instead of the little swirling Windows booting dots, you get a beautiful swirl and the Fedora logo very classily put underneath it. And that's what you see from the moment you turn the laptop on to when you're sitting at your login screen. And to my knowledge, right now, as we speak, that kind of seamless boot from start to finish is something that I haven't seen in any other distribution. And I mean, I would love to see it in every distribution because it just looks so darn pretty. But I don't know, can I get excited about a bootloader? I feel like I'm really scraping the bottom of the barrel by now, maybe. But it's one of those things. When you boot up Linux, it looks really nerdy from the start because you've just got a bucket load of scrolling text. You don't get that with Fedora. You get a lovely boot animation that fits in perfectly with the hardware that you have, works seamlessly with UEFI, and it makes it feel like Linux is just as native as a citizen on your hardware as Windows 10 that probably came on the device. And to me, that's the feeling that I get when I use Fedora. Okay, so that's a lot of really gushy stuff. Some of the stuff that I'd love to see improve between now and the next release has got to do with the installer. I feel like the installer is Well, I could say it's straightforward, but it does kind of lack a few options. It's one of the only distributions in the open source world that is still using the Anaconda installer. Obviously, they use it for specific reasons, and I will say it is robust in that it doesn't mess up all that often. It is quick and it is efficient, and you only should ever have to see the installer once. And so for those reasons, I can see why it's not really a priority to completely redo it from the ground up. But when you are doing it, you kind of have to know what you're doing, or you've got to be very trusting that the options that Fedora is choosing for you are what you want. And if you're dealing with a very partitioned system and with specific drives doing specific things, you probably will want to make sure and double check that the installer is going to do what you want it to do. So that's just my 2 cents. It would be great to see that redone from the ground up and given a bit of polish when it comes to user experience. Things like weird placements of back buttons and weird placements of accept and continue buttons kind of throw me a little bit. But by and large, again, it's something I see once every now and again whenever I reinstall the distribution, and I know my way around, so it's not a problem for me. And the installer has never mucked up. I've never had a Fedora installer misbehave on me and leave me with a broken system. And so for that sense, I can't really knock it, but it would be great to see some improvements there. Now, to me, it's hilarious, the release notes, because most of them are kind of, it feels like you've read them all before. It's GNOME 3.32 and some other bits and pieces. You're on the latest versions of most of your packages and development environments and all that fun stuff. Congratulations, that's what you come to expect from a new distro release. So if I was going to wrap all this up and put a bow on it, the reason that I'm sticking with Fedora 30 is because it's the only distribution right now out there in the Linux world that makes my laptop feel like it was designed to run Linux on it from the get-go. I don't have to do any major workarounds to do things like pinch to zoom or stylus support, or I can easily throw on a red light filter for my device at night. I've got quick controls and quick access to most of the things that I want to change about my hardware or my software. It understands every single shortcut key on my keyboard. It gives me great battery life. The screen rotates around when I flip the device over and turn it on its hinge. I'm finding fewer and fewer reasons to use Windows in a world that Fedora is creating. It's also super rock solid stable. I've used it for almost every video I've made over the last 12 months, and I've yet to get any crashes from it. Even Flatpak apps look right at home here. The latest version of KDE, with all of its pomp and ceremony, has worked really well for me, and it's integrated into the system really nicely, like better than it was before. It uses native theming. I've got all the icons there. Everything just looks like it belongs. And I don't know, call me crazy, but I think it's because they do so little to change what the original GNOME developers do with this distribution. Now, the other just couple quick things I want to point out is that they have added the Deepin desktop environment and Pantheon desktop environment to their repository, so it's really easy to go and get those. It's just a group install using DNF, so you can go grab those commands and you can use the elementary desktop, or you could use the Deepin desktop environment and enjoy those on a Fedora base. I've yet to test that out because I'm kind of on board with what GNOME is doing, probably more so than maybe some of the other desktop environments, but I'm curious to give it a try, so let me know if you want me to try those out and give my thoughts in the comments below. But honestly, they've each got their own distributions, so play with it as you will. I think that about does it for me. Like I said at the top, confirmational bias. For me, I like this distribution. I already liked this distribution, and it's done nothing to change my opinion on that. That'll be all from me. I hope you enjoyed the video and found it helpful. Let me know what the one thing is that keeps you running the Linux distribution that you are running. What is your confirmational bias? Let me know in the comments below. I'll see you all next time. Peace out, ladies and gentlemen.